acolo este, va fi corner, dragi ascultători.
Welcome back to this week's episode of It Ain't Broke. Is it broke? No, it ain't. Today we are discussing a film that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. I'm sure everyone has an opinion on, like the asshole. We are, of course, discussing the 1999 sci-fi cyberpunk epic, Wachowski epic, The Matrix. Continuing our T-themed films.
Two T films in a row.
Yes. On my left here is Mr. Ricardo Yahaxion.
Where's the lower third? It's here.
Yeah.
Tweet me. Tweet me your balls.
No dick pics.
DMs.
And I am, of course, Duncan Casey. I guess that's the
Other side.
Other side. Shit. Okay, there we go. All right. Yes. So, Ricardo Yahaxion.
Yes.
Las Matrixes, as it was named in Mexico and Portugal.
Famously, yeah.
Portuguese, second widest spoken language in the southern... No, the widest spoken language in the southern hemisphere. There you go.
That's my favourite quote from The Matrix.
Mm.
Did I Portuguese?
Neo-Portuguese. Yeah. How did you come to The Matrix?
I came to The Matrix. It's like 5 minutes in, we haven't talked about shit.
So sorry.
Professional. I was like 16 in 1999. I remember in 1999 in particular, I saw a shitload of movies that year. I saw basically everything that came out, big things, because like Deep Blue Sea and Austin Powers and South Park and Star Wars and The Matrix and stuff. And there were trailers for The Matrix that showed off people in sunglasses and the bullet time stuff, and gave away no plot. It was like kind of TV spots. And I was like, oh, that movie looks really cool. I'm at that stage in my life where I just constantly see films without any kind of discernment. So I'll go see The Matrix. Me and my friend Lee went to see The Matrix, and what I saw was this kind of like, what I considered at the time to be this kind of cool, futuristic take on Terminator-ish stuff. Always liked my sci-fi as a kid, and I do now, so that really ticked the boxes. The only time I'd seen anything even approximating the bullet time effect was the time travel effect they used in Stephen Hopkins' Lost in Space film.
Oh, okay.
So when they do the time jumps, they kind of spin around, but there's no kind of bullets, but they do a kind of similar effect, which I don't think is technically bullet time.
I don't think they did the same thing, yeah.
No, it's a similar looking effect. I don't think you can technically call it bullet time.
Right.
So it's something I hadn't seen before, and I thought it was cool. And it was, again, it's basically the Terminator without the time travel side of things. And I liked it a lot. Time has perhaps not been kind.
Yeah, no, I very much was kind of, it was in the same place in 1999. I was 15, and it was that thing. It was very much billed as we're talking very early days of the internet. I don't think I had email at that point, or if I did, I didn't use it. But that's the kind of, where I was. But I came to it for like word of mouth, and the TV and everything was saying they were pushing it as quite almost like a cultural touch point in a way. I have this weird recollection of it being this kind of like real, like, this is a big movement of cinema thing, which is perhaps slightly over-egging the mechanical pudding that is The Matrix. But I think, nevertheless, I remember going to the cinema and seeing it, and I think, like you say, all the advertising had been those big effects moments.
It's quite mysterious, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think the tagline was, "What is the Matrix?"
Yeah, because then of course Morpheus says that, and they were right to see. Now that's an example of really good, being able to highlight bits of the film but also say what is the Matrix and like just create.
Well, it's a good example of giving you a mystery and then giving you the fucking answer.
Yeah,
which films seem to not want to do anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned the sequels, as did I, really, but the first film clearly had sequel potential, but was clearly designed as an island, and you can watch it as a one-off, and it totally works as a one-off. It's bolting things onto it afterwards when it's like, oh, you were kind of just making this up as you went along, Yeah. And it is a standalone film, and it's before we got back into the thing of like, well, everything's a trilogy. It was just, and then afterwards they just kind of went, well, that made all the money, let's make more.
It's telling to me that they went in for 2 sequels shot back to back and did that whole thing, because I think that's only done in very few circumstances, and it's done as a sort of like, we are really confident that this first film was such a big thing that we know we can do 2 films worth, but we need to do them in such an economical way as to shoot them back to back.
Particularly then, because I think the thing that happened around the same time was, or similar times, when they did the pirate sequels back to back.
Yeah, because I always have this thing in my head that the sequels took a long time to come out for The Matrix, but they didn't really. I mean, it was like 4 years, I think. Was it 2003? I think.
Yeah, it's like 4, which in this turnover now probably seems longer, but then...
Well, I don't know, because things nowadays can take quite a long time. You don't realise it, but I mean, it's things like certainly James Bond movies which used to be churned out. I mean, in the first instance, once a year, but now it's like, was once every 2 years, and now it's like 5 years.
This whole model's been wrecked though, because like the mainline Star Wars films come out every 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I know there's one every year, but the mainline ones, but this by design. And obviously the Marvel stuff and whatever, I don't know, because but then the gap between, say, Superman and Batman versus Superman, Man of Steel, sorry, Batman, it was 4 years or so, wasn't it?
It was 3 years.
3 years, yeah. So it's kind of reasonably long. So it felt longer, and then between the 2 sequels was a year. But we're not here to talk about those. We're here to talk about Los Matrices.
It's important to I mean, because like you say, it's interesting to see where things went afterwards, but I do think this is, I think it's best viewed as an island. And very much, I think it is intended to be that way. So it certainly draws on Hong Kong cinema. Am I right?
Yeah, well, they literally brought over Yen Wu Ping to come and do the choreography, and he'd done Drunken Master and stuff with Jackie Chan and a bunch of stuff. And you know, a lot of the gunplay is very John Woo.
Yeah.
There are bits of Grant Morrison comics in there. There are bits of anime. I mean, it's sort of like. You know what, like 28 Days Later is an amalgamation of like John Wyndham and George Romero and a bunch of stuff. And Sunshine is, you know, a bunch of different 70s sci-fi movies built together, if you want to look at it like that. In a good way.
Yeah.
And The Matrix is kind of that. It kind of borrows a lot of things. I think The Invisibles was the main thing that Grant Morrison has issues with The Matrix.
Okay.
So it's not thoroughly original, but it's these elements are combined in an original way and in a satisfying way, if you ask me.
Well, in the way that Terminator's not an original work.
Well, you know, it's Harlan Ellison and everything else, yeah.
But it's what's nice is it's original characters and it's original, you know, and which is like such a breath of fresh air. Because today it's all remakes, and it's not all. I mean, people love to say that.
Yeah.
It's not all like that, and I know lots of people want to make original stories. It's just a case of, you know, convincing the money people. But I think with this one, you know, it was. It's a very interesting film to look at in hindsight as well. You know, I wish I could remember the name. I was listening to a podcast in which they brought up the very salient point of obviously the Wachowskis planted the seeds in this for a lot of what would happen later on, which is things like that. It's a very transitional movie, like in a really sort of interesting way. Like Neo is an outcast. Neo has, you know, there's all sorts of stuff in it about discovering yourself, being awoken to who you are, like, you know, changing, becoming, you know, all that sort of stuff. Fighting back against a sort of, you know, autonomous.
Well, I think that through the lens of 2018 and knowing where the Wachowskis, you know, they're no longer the Wachowski brothers. They're just the Wachowskis. They don't go by sisters, but they go by the Wachowskis, I think.
Yeah.
Considering what was clearly going through their heads, it very much feels like an allegory for trans issues.
Yeah.
Because it's about kind of being born in a place and in a way that you're not comfortable with and doesn't make sense.
And not knowing why.
And not knowing why, and then the quest for identity and being pulled out by someone else who shows you the way. And you know, it's not something that I know intimately, but
sure.
It seems pretty obvious to me. I would hope that seems to be.
And it's done in such a light way that, like, you obviously don't, you know, that adds to it if you want to see it there, but it also is just it's a human thing as well. I'm sure we've all at times felt out of place or whatever. And
I think general kind of quest for identity stuff is why a lot of things work, and I think people relate to that whether they, even if they don't realise it, you know, trying to find yourself in a certain way. And I think the interpretation of The Matrix, right now you can look at it as a trans thing, but you could have looked at it as any kind of, you know, you could look at it as a gay thing if you wanted at a certain point in time, or any other kind of, or even like maybe questions about your own origins and nationality or bloodline or family or whatever. You can look at it in different ways for these different lenses, but looking at it now, it looks pretty strongly a certain way. You know, which is kind of cool. And I think a lot of people puzzles over it at the time, and now it's kind of like, oh, this perhaps makes a lot more sense. Again, through this lens.
For sure, yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I think it's interesting. Again, like what frustrates, but then what's funny is a lot of that then doesn't carry through, like in the sequel. I know we're not really talking about the sequels, but it's like what's interesting is how just how sort of rich in allegory and stuff this is, and then how not rich.
Well, you know, let's just say if The Matrix is a film that's actually about a number of different issues, the Matrix sequels are actually about a race of cool hackers in black jackets that live in an underground base of submarine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
totally.
actually about stuff. I think actually we might get comments about this because perhaps I just haven't given those sequels the time, but I just don't like to watch them.
Yeah, you know what? I think they are. In an ideal world, I would try and mash them together and make one film out of them. I know that's a sort of Justice Leaguean approach to certain, you know what I mean. But I just think
Casey cut.
There's too much of a gap between. There's one thing I would say for all three of the films actually is that the pacing. The first one I forgive it because it's still telling a story, but I do find that the second act in all three films tends to be very drawn out and not particularly. I mean, I get it with the first one. You kind of like no, because you need to establish the world as it is and what the Matrix is and what we're fighting for and all that sort of stuff. But it takes forever to actually get to all the stuff you want to see, which is the breakout stuff. But then I get that you have to build up to that, and that's
when are the special effects starting?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. But you know, I mean, again, that's okay.
Well, yeah, it's gone into the cultural kind of lexicon as well, isn't it? Because I still, when I have deja vu, I still say there's a glitch in the Matrix and stuff like that. And, people have adopted the term red pill.
That's true.
And I really like that because it turns out it was referring to trans issues. It's been adopted by the kind of people that don't like that kind of thing.
That's true, eh? Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, very good point. Me.
Yeah. You know, I think it's really, and just the whole concept of people refer to simulations as a matrix and stuff like that, and just the whole look of it become cultural shorthand. Much like Tom Cruise on The Wire in Mission Impossible was parodied. I think it's still being parodied today.
I'm sure it is.
The Matrix, you know, like Shrek do it or whatever, like a bullet time.
Scary Movie did it. It's just like, ugh. I mean that. So let's talk about the bullet time then. That effect was achieved by setting up tons of DSLRs. That's
insane. So like they use a computer to plot the course of the shot. Yeah. So it's basically a circular chamber with cameras taking stills. Yeah. At certain increments, and then of course for the nature of the shot they'd have to be higher and lower and stuff like that. So if you watch the making ofs, it's mental, and then they go and paste it all together. And the thing is, nothing looked like that before. You know, no one had seen it before, and it came at a cusp where that was done practically and then augmented with CGI. Yeah. Whereas in the sequels, they were very proud of the fact that they did a full 3D scan of people and just put it in a computer, and it looked awful. Just a fucking...
It looks so rubbery, like that. The agent who I can't remember the guy played him.
Like Kickboxer 3 or whatever, isn't he?
He's the stunt agent. Yeah, and then he went on to be in John Wick. He's one of the main sort of guys in John Wick. Oh. But you know, in the freeway, he's the one who like jumps over and lands.
I remember.
There's that honky shot of like his sort of rubbery ass CG character landing on the bonnet of an awesome bit of like where the car crumples and goes up all over the place. But it's just like
just watching that for the first time, because it's when Trinity does a kind of crane kick. Yeah. And it goes round, and it's just like, what the fuck did I just see? Yeah. Like I think all the ads with the rooftop thing, you know.
Yeah, it was the.
It's like what just happened? Like how did they do that? And then when the DVD came out, and again it was one of the first ever DVDs. And it was just kind of, what the fuck? How did that work? And then, because you couldn't just go online as readily then.
I had the video, and at the end after the credits, it had all the making of stuff.
I had the tape first, and then I had the DVD.
Right.
It was just like, you know, I've never seen anything like this before, like as an action spectacle, because I had seen John Woo movies, and I knew well enough. And I'd seen Ghost in the Shell and stuff like that, and I knew well enough what these things were. Yeah. But like in a kind of mainstream Hollywood thing, to bring all that stuff over, okay, maybe you can argue that it's cultural appropriation or whatever. But
what isn't?
In terms of making that effect, you never see anything like it. And the whole thing was, and the film itself, it was in the text of the film, it is still really mysterious up to a point. And then they do the kind of, you know, their little, I can't remember what they call it, but their kind of mini Matrix simulation room where it's all white. You know, all the whited out backgrounds and stuff, where he lays out
construct.
The construct,
is that what he calls it? Yeah.
He lays out to him what's going on. Yeah. And unfortunately, it doesn't make any sense as a conceit, because it's just like, oh, people are batteries, and it's like, what, they don't have fucking solar power? Because in the second movie you show us, they just had to go above the clouds. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and also, like, why wouldn't you just chain a load of cows together, like, that don't need cows that don't need to know that reality is real, you know what I mean? Or why couldn't you just numb us all and make us all think we were asleep? Or
it doesn't make any sense at all. But I think because because it refers to like, you know, it's got philosophical influences from things like Immanuel Kant and whatever. People applied all this highfalutin shit to The Matrix about how it was so fucking clever.
Well, that's where it went wrong, I think.
It's not really.
No.
And the sequels, again, I talk about the sequels, but the sequels really kind of were smelling their own farts about how clever it was.
The fucking architect guy.
Oh God, that's the worst.
The gave
Some
rise to one of
commenter accused me of talking like the architect once. Go suck my dick.
Vis-a-vis, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, right.
Which it gave rise to one of the best. Was it SNL or the MTV Movie Awards?
It's like Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell's like, vis-a-vis, like just yelling words at him because he's getting confused. Concurrently. I think like again, when you look at it through the lens of allegory, it makes more sense. Like the idea that we're all sort of just being literally milked.
Well, you're a resource.
Yeah,
and a big part of the thing is just being. I think part of it, it's almost like Office Space, and it's like it's being used by people and being part of a system. Because of course, the big metaphor is being part of a system that you don't want to be part of, and you're literally used as a resource. I get that. As a conceit in the film, you just have to kind of, once they do that scene, it's quite a cool. The reveal that everyone's living in a simulation is cool.
Yeah,
it's a cool reveal in 1999 in particular, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. Why they're doing it doesn't make any sense. Don't give The Matrix too much credit. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, it's believable. It's believable within its own sort of logic. But what's more important is about how we then examine the human condition through that lens, right? So, I mean, it's interesting, like you said, like you bring up the thing about. It's a machine's interpretation of what humans want, and I know the architect goes off on one about like, that the first mate. Oh no, is it?
Smith says it in this one.
Smith says it, yeah. That the
I
first
like that as well.
I
always like that because it's like we made a utopia and you fuckers wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
And that's a nice sort of character assassination of the human psyche. It's kind of like we give you something nice and you won't fucking believe it.
Well, it's and it's allegorical of like God, Jesus, and man. But it's interesting that. The real reality that people would accept is the fact like that Neo or whatever Mr. Thomas Anderson works in a cubicle is essentially doing what he's doing in reality in a cubicle, like just sitting there being a little drone and being fucking, and that is brilliant when he's called into the guy's office and being gone at by his boss.
Yeah,
and he's just he keeps cutting to the guys doing the window outside, and it's just
like that and Fight Club.
Yeah.
Same year, and similar scenes that go in different ways. And actually, I think Office Space is 99 as well.
Could be.
Or was that 90? Yeah, I think that's 99 too. And they're all, and Office Space plays that's writ large, but they all kind of start in that. They're all about kind of cubicle, white collar, middle class rebellion, really. Those films, and based on book in one instance, but yeah, interesting, very interesting. And also, everybody wanted that Motorola phone that went. But the real phone kind of went.
Well, it wasn't the same. The only thing that was the same about it was the fact that it did that. I remember everyone going, "I got the Matrix phone." It's like, no, it looks nothing like that.
And it barely did it. That's what when I saw one in real life, it just kind of goes like, because in the of course it's augmented with special effects. It goes like, Sting! And like in real life, it just kind of goes. Oh.
Yeah. It was sort of like sprung loaded, but broke very quickly. I remember my friend whose dad owned a mobile phone shop in Cambridge had one. And he was like, click, and it very quickly broke in short order. And to the point where we'd have to be like,
fuck's sake.
It didn't serve a purpose. It was just
was cool in a film once.
Yeah. But yeah, so, I mean, it's funny because it's a film. When was the last time you watched it?
I've actively avoided watching it for a while, and it's one of these things where I am qualified to talk about it because I watched it so much when I was younger. Yeah, me too. And I keep meaning to kind of watch it again. It's always had, much like the original Star Wars, it's got loads of really awkward lines of dialogue in it that sort of make me go like, ugh. It's like, it's our way or the highway and stuff like that. And it's just like, ugh. Yeah. I would still quite like to watch it. And I think in terms of its filmmaking, because really great camera work in it. It uses kind of great sort of vertiginous angles in certain places, and it's great at showing kind of isolation and smothering. And then it kind of does lots of great camera movement. There's, of course, the bullet time stuff is amazing. The action scenes are really well covered. Brilliant soundtrack. There's there's a remix with Prodigy Minefields on there. There's a Hot Rod Herman remix of Rob Zombie, which I really liked when I was 16. And there's Propeller Heads in the lobby scene. Such an excellent choice of music. And the thing is, people view it as this clever philosophical statement. It's like, it's a cool action movie with some nice allegory in it. Let's not get carried away.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what undid it ultimately was that pinning too much on it. You know, and actually the biggest crime I think the sequels make is that they just muddy the waters even more to the point where you go, you don't really know what you're doing.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the Emperor's New Clothes thing. You watch this, it was like, you didn't really.
Yeah.
But that lobby scene in terms of practical effects, because you talked about in the True Lies review, like there's a ding, and then the bit of
the tile falls off.
And that scene doesn't really, I don't recall that particularly using bullet time. It's just cool slow motion and wire work.
There's a
So it's like he runs along the wall shooting and stuff, and you know, there's all practical dust flying off and just all these stunts. And then that's another thing, it's like lots of wire work, which we hadn't really seen in the West before, and it kind of used that. And it contextualised it in the way that they're basically kind of superpowers, you know, and that's how that works and stuff. It's very kind of green as well. It's got this kind of chemical process, I guess, where there's greens and blues everywhere.
Well, yeah, for the Matrix, to symbolise the Matrix, right?
Well, yeah. So when they're like his job, everything's kind of green. It's got a kind of sterile green,
sickly.
It takes place in kind of I mean, it's all Australia, but it takes place in, you know, nondescript city USA, I guess. I really like the cast.
It has that real quality, doesn't it? I think about being awoken. That's why I think a lot of it's ambiguous as to where it is, what time it is, because they don't even know what year it is, all that kind of thing. It's like, so that it gives you that sort of state of like when you're in the Matrix. A lot of the stuff you watch in the Matrix is sort of fuzzy-headed and not quite like you're not given answers to an awful lot of what anything is, but that's, I think, quite deliberate in that, you know, you're not supposed
there's lots of, like you say, there's lots of kind of transitions. So inside the Matrix there's lots of moving between places, and there's lots of close shots that are probably shot on like 50s, so you know, you get kind of shot reverse shot with really kind of bokeh background and stuff, or it takes place at night, so you do get kind of big there goes Neo's motorbike, probably. That's in Valverde too, everything's here. You get kind of lots of wide shots of the city and stuff, particularly when he's up in the balcony, but often when they're in cars and in buildings, it's very close and quite tight. At least until he's kind of, you know, awoken, sort of dragged through it. And you know, again, when they take him out of the Matrix, it's a literal birth scene.
Yeah.
It's like, my eyes hurt, you've never used them before. And it's like, you see him being born, and like they pull the thing out of his, it's like, it goes right down, and just the jack in the back of your head and stuff, and sort of transhuman.
It's got like layers, which something which they kind of did later on in Elysium, isn't it? Where he's like his skin sort of, because it's been shedding while he's in there, he's like pulling all bits of skin off himself, and he's like all wrinkly and white, and
he's like a little man fetus.
Muscles are all atrophied.
This is a good use of Keanu Reeves, man, because as kind of being this sort of dumbfounded blank thing, and I'm not saying that in a cruel way. Like, it's just this constant wonder and bewilderment that plays across his face the whole time, which works really well. And you know, Lawrence Fishburne has looked like this sort of like wise dude since he was about 12.
Yeah.
So like Apocalypse Now, he's like a beanstalk, and then he's in like you know, Red Heat and stuff. But he's always been able to, like, because I think the most notable one is Boys in the Hood, where him and Cuba Gooding Jr. are about like 4 years between him, but he plays his dad.
Right.
But I think really convincingly, because he's got this kind of gravity to him.
He's a commanding presence. You know, whatever you put him in, he's commanding. Like, and that's one. Like you said, his gravitas that he's got. He's great in this. He's great in like Event Horizon. He's great in. I've been watching Hannibal, the TV show, as well. He's Jack Crawford in that, and he's fantastic. I mean, and he's a great Perry White as well. He's got that.
I know. He's one of the things I really liked about that.
Yeah, and it's funny when you listen to him in interviews, because he sounds like quite a chilled out dude, but he's got such a command on screen that you like.
Physicality, because he does a Mr. Spock thing where he folds himself on his back all the time.
Is that a Mr. Spock thing?
Yeah, Spock likes to do that.
Okay.
I was folded behind the back. The main draw for me is and was Hugo Weaving.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks amazing, firstly, that kind of get up as a bad guy, like, because he's like super capable computer robot man. But his deliveries, and it's like in you know, the Star Wars prequels, right? I'm not a fan, but every time Ian McDiarmid's in him, he's so good. Ian McDiarmid's amazing, and he just goes, and he knows he's making garbage, so he just goes nuts. And Vader. I'm not going to say the same about the Matrix sequels necessarily, knowing they're doing garbage, but Hugo Weaving, every time he's on screen, he's just magnificent. He's so good.
What was it? Me and my friends used to do. Like, if one of us had, this is probably sorry, but if someone had done a fart or we'd be like, or a nasty poo, we'd be like, you know what I can't stand? It's the smell. I feel What is it like? Penetrated.
He says like I think he said this is really great because he takes
all the sweat
off his head and he goes like, I think he says I can taste your stink.
Yeah,
like, I can taste your
repulsed by it. Yeah,
I do. This is a really weird deep cut, but I just love this story. When we worked in hotel beers, there was a man called Mr. Anderson that used to come into my friend's hotel all the time.
Nice.
And in between one of his visits, there'd been a slight refurbishment. So my mate Nick waited for him to come in so he could say, Mr. Anderson, welcome back. We've made a few changes. and I can tell he was just waiting.
Did he do it?
Yeah, of course he did. Of course he fucking did. And the dude was probably just like, eh?
That's from the second?
That's from the sequels, yeah. But like, Mr. Anderson, it does do that thing, you know, it's far from perfect in a lot of ways, and it's kind of slight ropiness is what makes me compare it to the original Star Wars, because I do think there are lines of dialogue that don't work, and bits of performance that don't work, and people egg it on a bit too much. And it also does the thing I don't like of like, all hackers are sexy, edgy renegades. And it's like, if the Resistance was made out of real hackers, we'd be fucked.
Picture that in the real world. Like, let's be kind. So you're in London somewhere, right, at night.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people run down the street in like ankle-length fucking like PVC coats and dressed like them.
Yeah.
Even if they were doing cool backflips and whatever, you'd be like,
see, yeah. In any part of London apart from Camden, I'd be like, this is normal. It's completely normal.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, and you still get people that walk around like in the Matrix gear and stuff, which, you know, fair dues. What I always think though, is when I see people dressed like that, is when I see, and this is so basic, I'm not making any kind of cultural assassination. I just always want to give them some water, particularly when it's July. It's like, you're going to get heat stroke, mate. You're going to die. What are you wearing? You can't wear a rubber black vest in July. You're wearing a trench coat and Frankenstein boots. Man, you're going to overheat. You know?
Yeah, it's that thing of that sort of armour, isn't it? That's what I think people gravitate towards, things like that. I mean, they talk about suits as a gentleman's armour and all that kind of thing. It's like the thing you put on to project an image. I guess that's where like goths and people, I don't know, what are people who dress up like Matrix?
Well, it comes from I don't want to say too much. It comes from the goth tradition, doesn't it? I think.
Is it?
But it's like goth is more kind of makeup and stuff like that. I don't want to say.
Yeah.
I'm too normcore to comment on this type of malarkey.
Yeah, so I'm not passing judgment, but I believe it's part of that. You know, putting on a shell.
You know, you could say the Matrix was quite influential in that way, but people were already dressing like that. That's another thing. I mean, the Matrix just takes a lot of things and reconfigures them in a pleasing way, rather than inventing anything particularly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny seeing that like that later on. You know, when they started, because will come the sequels when you've got like Jada Pinkett and you're sort of starting to pull in more like other actors and they're putting them in sort of those kind of clothes. It's weird, but I mean it's cool. Like I mean I don't know. Like it's weird how like though when they're in Zion, they're just dressed in like sacks and rags and stuff, and then everyone it seems chooses to look like that.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like everyone's given the opportunity to magically summon clothes, and they all dress the same way.
Yeah,
it's like I can finally be an individual. Black leather.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Because some of them wear suits, black suit. Like,
that's right. Yeah, we had that '90s thing of black, like basically dark shirt and dark tie things. No contrast.
You can wear anything you want.
Yeah.
All right, fine. I want some nice trainers, but other than that, jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah, because isn't the idea to not stand out in the Matrix when you go?
Yeah, that's it. And then you're fucking walking around. There's also that thing as well. It's like they have to kill everybody because they can turn into agents. But it means they're just slaughtering.
They're gunning down innocents.
The security guards and stuff. It's like,
yeah, true. Yeah,
that guy's just working there, but I guess you can't really because they've turned into an agent and pull your dick off or whatever.
Yeah. as a quick sidebar, did you play any of the games that came as part of the sequels rather?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
they suck. I mean, the Path
of Neo is alright.
Path of Neo, I never actually played that one. I understand that's a lot better.
Yeah, I've got that.
Enter the Matrix because that tied in to the movies and had specially shot scenes. Right. I also quite liked sections of the Animatrix.
Oh,
did you watch any of that?
I think so.
There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah,
there was some good stuff. I think there's one by the people that did Aeon Flux, which is about like it's the only other person to ever break out of the Matrix manually, and he's like a sprinter.
Yeah,
and he runs so fast he runs out the Matrix or whatever.
Right.
There's another one that's the whole whole backstory of the Matrix and how it happened and how there was a robot revolt and stuff. It's really cool.
I think I remember. Yeah.
And there was I never read the comic because they did that as this big multimedia thing that were tied to these bloated, disappointing films. But I rented the game the day it came out, and that's kind of like So basically, Max Payne came out like 3 years ago and was much better than this.
Yeah.
And you failed to. I mean, even a one-to-one copy of that would be shameful, but better than what you actually made. Really awkward, janky games.
Path of Neo was much better, but I think it had more time to gestate and develop. Obviously came after the hype had gone, really.
They got to kind of do that retroactively, didn't they? It's got that wacky alternate ending where you fight a giant Agent Smith kaiju, apparently.
Yeah.
So I understand.
No, you do. It's all right, though. It's quite cool. It's an enjoyable, but you effectively just play through the films. As Neo.
Well, that's the thing. When the games come out, it's like, why am I these schmucks?
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you just showed me at the end of the last film Neo can fly, and I'm playing as these schmoes.
That's it. Yeah.
Today's the day of aircraft and
being.
That's the plane from North by Northwest.
Yeah.
I've just decided to fold in all fictional things into Valverde.
Cowboy Grant in a
Cowboy Grant.
No, I mean it's funny how Henry. The everything went with the two sequels, but I think that's the thing. I think that first film was such a cultural touchstone, and no one was kind of on it as far as merchandising and all that sort of stuff. So come the second and third film, it was like they threw everything at it, and like you say, they were tied to these not so great. But I do think I seem to remember the Wachowskis having this thing about we weren't going to do a sequel. And I guess they just dumped all the money in their lap, and they were like, "All right." And like, who can blame them, man? Like, I mean, fuck,
come on, like we wouldn't, right? Like,
and I think for that, like, they're all right. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's things about the sequels that I think you can take away from them that are perfectly good. I mean, certainly all the like action sequences, CGI notwithstanding.
Hugo Weaving.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving. I mean, they built a freaking freeway so they could have a chase, and make all that stuff. So that's pretty impressive. Carrie-Anne Moss is someone we haven't spoken about, but I think she's fabulous.
Great. I like her in whatever she turns up in. So
you must have seen Fido, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, she's such a good time because she tends to get typecast a little bit. And Fido, she's doing something completely different.
Yeah.
I've just had a recent kind of strange obsession with Due South, and I remember she was in an episode of Due South.
Oh, is she?
I think she's Canadian. So
yes,
all the Canadians were in Due South.
Oh, okay.
So obviously. Christopher Nolan's first Memento.
Oh yeah.
Doing a kind of femme fatale thing. Yeah, she's great. Fucking love her. And she was good as the character that crossed across the Marvel TV shows. This kind of bitch lawyer lady.
Oh really? Okay, I didn't see that.
So she would turn up across various ones.
Right. So that's the Matrix. That's our take on the Matrix with a the, not the other Matrix. Anyway, not this Matrix. Are we in the Matrix? I'm not going to do a funky thing about are we in the Matrix and then cut to like code and shit like that because it's been done. It's all been done, but it's interesting looking at this film in hindsight and picking it apart and having some fun with it. And I hope you enjoyed our discussion on the topic. Join us again next time when we'll be talking about more movies and more stuff. And please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Also, we have a Patreon. That really helps us continue to do all this and take the time and use Mr. Jackson's equipment and keep it all running. And the more we can get through that, the more we can build on this, the more we can do things like put the podcasts out on iTunes and all that kind of stuff. So please keep it up. There's a link in the description.
There will be. Yeah.
There will be. And after this video. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.